they were weeping, not because I made a mistake, but because for some of them, it was the first time ever that a person with authority, a parent, a teacher, a leader said, I made a mistake. I am sorry. And this is how we're going to get through this together. It was such a healing moment for so many of the women in the room and for that circle as a whole. And it was so scary for me to do, but it was so important.
That was Joanna Lindenbaum, creator of the Applied Depth Practitioner Institute, and this is episode 46. Welcome to the Brave Woman Podcast. I'm your host, Tanya Lynn, founder of Sistership Circle and author of Open Your Heart and The Art of Leading Circle. I'm the mother of 2 girls, an 8 on the Enneagram, aka the Challenger, happily married to my business partner, Brent, love connecting with nature, and have put in well over 10,000 hours circling with other women. On this podcast, we will explore how to embody the brave woman so that you can take action on your dreams and desires, unapologetically speak your truth, and live life on your own terms. Grab a seat and a cup of tea, and let's get started. So today we have my very dear sister, Joanna Lindenbaum, and we are talking about going deep, our favorite subject. This is what I love about this woman is she has really taken a stand to go deep and to give people all over the world the tools and the awareness and creating these containers to go deep with integrity. So yay, welcome Joanna. I'm so excited for us to have this conversation today.
Me too. Thank you for having me, and I've been so looking forward to this.
Yeah. So let's start with how you have been a brave woman in the world. And you used to be known primarily as a business coach. And then something happened and you shifted into this work that you do today. And that in and of itself is such a brave act of stepping into your soul purpose, your soul expression. So I'd love for you to start there with that journey and what it took for you to make that transition and what even spurred it, what it looked like for you to take that leap.
Yeah, such a good question. So you're absolutely right. For many, many years, I was known as a business coach, and a business coach who very much did a lot of deep inner work. Also, I taught marketing skills and business skills, and also deep transformational inner work for leaders. And the combination of which helped them grow their businesses. And this went on for many, many years, and it was great. But at a certain point, as I looked at my clients and I looked at the incredible success that they were having, and I saw that they were growing their businesses very much the same way I was, not by doing all this crazy newfangled marketing and funnels and all the things, but I saw how they were really growing their business, which was through happy clients who were over the moon with the work that they were doing, re-signing over and over again and sending them tons of referrals and just shouting about them, from the rooftops and on social media. And when I started to look more deeply at that, what I really saw was that all of that wasn't because of the marketing I was teaching them. It was because of the ways that these clients were learning from me how to coach and how to facilitate groups. I was modeling for them incredible transformational skills that they were then bringing to their clients and their groups. And yes, of course, the marketing was important, but it was that combination of the inner work for themselves and the inner work that they were bringing to their clients to create results that was actually growing their business. And this was like a huge light bulb moment for me. Number one, to see this. And number two, when I saw it, I recognized in myself, like, this was actually my brilliance. Like, yes, I was good at teaching marketing, sure. But there were people much more brilliant at that than I was. Where my brilliance was and where it had always been was in co-creating transformation and teaching others how to co-create transformation. And I saw it so clearly, like that was the path forward, that it was about moving forward with training practitioners how to go deep, how to learn how to really create incredible transformation with their clients, how to do it in a way that was high integrity and trauma informed, how to use somatic techniques, all the things I had already been teaching, but to actually formalize that as my business. I could see it clearly, but speaking of being brave, I didn't want to do it. I wanted so much to do it. My heart wanted to do it. But other parts of me were like, no way. You have an incredibly successful business with a reputation as being a business coach. Yes, of course, this has been threaded through your work throughout, but nobody knows you as this. You're going to completely pivot and change. And I really had to work through some of those fears of people aren't going to like this. At that point in the industry, I would have been the only one talking about the importance of quality work and going deeper, and how your actual practice is as important as your business. There were a lot of fears there. Disappointing clients who wanted to keep on just learning marketing from me. But luckily and thankfully, the pull to what I knew was the next right and aligned path was bigger than the fears. And I like to say, I put my big girl panties on and took a deep breath and, step by step made that shift.
Yeah, and one of the things that you teach is the moving through resistance. And you've got these beautiful archetypes. I think it's one of the most brilliant parts of your work. So can we dive into that? Because it's such a big piece that even like you've shown and you've walked through yourself of overcoming the resistance. So can we, let's talk about resistance.
Yeah, the work on resistance has definitely been born out of both ways of helping clients for decades, but also my own resistance. And that pivot that I was just sharing about, that we were just talking about, was one of those moments of deep resistance that I had to work through. So I'll just take a step back, and I'll even just to answer, like, what is resistance? What is it when it comes up for yourself, when it comes up for clients, when it comes up in groups? And resistance is the ways that we self-sabotage, or we procrastinate, or we go into our victimhood, or all the different strategies that we have that distract us from the work at hand, the situation at hand, moving forward, and instead take us to those other places. So I always like to say the reason why resistance is so tricky is that it distracts us from actually coming face to face with our fear and working with it. So we all have fears, because fear is just a natural, normal process of growth for human beings. And anytime we're moving into a place that's bigger for ourselves or moving towards a goal, part of that human process of up-leveling is that a fear is going to come up. And that core fear might, be the fear of not being enough, or the fear of being visible, or the fear of being rejected, or the fear of disappointing others, or the fear of others getting angry at us, or the fear of being alone. You know, there's so many different core fears. As practitioners, we can support our clients to work with those fears by looking straight at them, becoming friends with those fears. However, sometimes it gets trickier because our egos are super smart and they don't want to look at the fear because it's hard, because it's scary. And so instead it distracts. It distracts by procrastinating. It distracts by, I didn't really want to do that in the first place. That was a bad idea that my coach and I came up with for that strategy. It distracts by like all of a sudden becoming flaky when we're not flaky. And it's almost like the resistance wraps itself around the core fear. So it's like, okay, we have to like, look at me, I'm judging, or look at me, I'm procrastinating, or look at me, I'm going into victim mode, or I've gotten confused. And then we get distracted by that. We never have to look at the core fear itself. And so as practitioners and as human beings in our own very messy human experience, we want to recognize resistance for what it is, name what I call the resistance archetypes. We can talk about those, work with the resistance archetypes so that then we can soften that resistance layer and actually have the green light to work with the fears themselves.
Yeah, so shall we go in? I mean, you've kind of been talking about them, but can we actually name these resistant archetypes?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll say there can be an exhaustive list of resistance archetypes. They come up in so many shapes and forms and flavors. But here are some of the most common ones that I've seen over the years. First one, the one that I personally know best, one of my best friends, is what I call the victim. So the victim archetype shows up when we go into fear, when all of our defenses are up, like we go into like, oh my gosh, and then the victim is the one who becomes helpless. Like, woe is me, this is too hard, everybody else has it easier than me, they can do it, but I can't because of my family, or because of, you know, it's like you are a victim to all of your circumstances, and that becomes the distraction from actually working with the fear and the topic at hand. The victim can be tricky. All of these can be tricky because they're rooted in a little bit of truth. Like, yes, it is hard, right? Yes, of course, you know, there are other circumstances that are beyond our control. But when we go into that victim place, it's like we feel like we are, everything else is controlling us. We're completely helpless. We have no control over our circumstances. Yeah.
And this is the one that, like, oh my God, Brant and I have been so in the victim archetype of resistance with this, with our project. And yeah, it's like we get so sucked into the circumstances of, oh, you know, we don't speak Spanish and we're doing this in Costa Rica where it's so hard to do anything here because of the Pura Vida lifestyle, you know, and oh, we've got these two kids and we have one babysitter right now who's 13, so we can only use her once a week. And it's just like this, we just get, and so we've been really like having to kind of pull each other out of it. And hopefully we're not in it at the same time. And we've had some beautiful conversations though, where we've been able to look at just the fear of failure, the fear of, like, actually, like, do I just believe in myself here that I can make this happen? And
Did we make like the fear of, did we make a mistake in saying yes to this? And so it's like, no, it's not about the fact that we're victims to being under resourced. It's like the deep down fear of maybe I'm not actually the person who could pull this off.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I'm so glad you're sharing that because it's such a good example because if you weren't more self-aware and have all the tools that you have, you could get just stuck in that distraction of all of the woe is me and not ever get to finally being able to look at and then work with the core fear. It's like such a tricky distraction that the ego can pull up with the resistances. I love that you're mentioning you and Brent because I'm kind of chuckling over myself here because I have a very different situation with my husband because he is not very victim like he doesn't have that strong archetype inside of him. And so when I go into my victim, my resistance archetype starts to dance with his resistance archetype, which is the next one we'll talk about, which is the judge. He starts rolling his eyes. His judge starts rolling his eyes at my victim is like, oh, she's in this again. And I usually, because I'm self-aware enough, I have this like out of body experience of like, who is this catastrophically negative woman talking to my husband right now?
Yeah.
Acting like, so it's funny how that our resistance archetypes can merge with or play off or dance with other people's archetypes. And I bring that up also from the practitioner standpoint, because our energetics as practitioners are so freaking important when our clients go into resistance. If we're not aware and our clients start to have resistance and our energetics are off, we're going to go into one of our resistance archetypes. It's a form of shadow, and then the shadow dance happens, right? So maybe our victim will start dancing with our client's victim, or our flake or confused one will start dancing with our client's judge, and that's how it engages. As practitioners, we want to stay grounded. We don't want to go into our fears of I'm not good enough, or the client isn't good enough, or I'm not whole and complete, or the client isn't whole and complete, or something has gone wrong here, because that is a surefire way to tip us inadvertently into that resistance archetype. I call it a vortex of energy where we're not ourselves and we act in these patterned ways. We need to hold that strong, loving, compassionate container when a client's resistance archetype comes up.
Yeah.
And for our partners too.
And for our partners, yes. Well, let's go into the judge, because I can see already how I dance in that victim, but then I go into judge with him. So I'd love for you to share this and I can name it, of how it shows up in our relationship.
Yeah, for sure. And the victim and the judge do have a lot of crossover. They're related. Yeah. It's easy to slip from one into the other. The judge is more like, ugh, this was the worst idea in the world. The judge often blames others, but not in that helpless way, but in that like, oh, it's your fault, like you suck way. In client work, it can show up as, oh, coach, whoever the coach is or the practitioner, like you were wrong to make that suggestion, or you haven't paid enough attention to me, and that's why I can't move forward. The judge can also turn on itself, like I just suck, or I'm just not good at this, and so this is how it is. But it's basically this kind of energy of criticism that shows up again as a great diversion from the issues at hand. All of these resistance archetypes, what an archetype is archetypal energy. We get caught up. It can feel, like I said earlier, like this energetic vortex that doesn't feel like our natural, authentic, energy, but we're so compelled towards it. So for the judge, it's like being compelled towards this like really critical nature.
Yeah. Yeah. So I go with Brent is I go into the poor us and especially the poor me, I would even say more martyr of like, oh, well, I have to hold all of it, as the mother, who's doing the primary caregiving with the kids, right? But then I go into judgment of he won't do his work, right? So now I'm better than him. And we're going to fail because of him. Like, you suck. Like, you can't, you're doing all the bad things, and now I'm the better person because I can see the victim and I've taken myself out of victim, but you're still in it, so therefore it's all your fault.
Yes. Yep, that is right. That is classic judge. Yeah. That is classic judge. And again, keep on saying this, but to underscore it, like for ourselves and especially as practitioners, that is such a beautiful distraction from actually being like, wow, we're doing this big thing. Yeah. And it's scary. It's scary to take this risk. I'm scared of failing. I'm scared it's going to take longer than I want. Right? Like all the different things. That's the more honest conversation and working through those feelings. But our egos is just so much easier to go to these other resistance places. Yeah. Another common one, and I'll name a few. They're all kind of related. The confused one. So that's, some people, their go-to place for resistance is like, they're whip smart, normally. But all of a sudden, when they go into fear, their distraction mechanism is, I'm confused. Like, I don't understand these instructions. I don't understand how to do this. This feels really overwhelming. A related one to the confused one is the flake, someone who's normally super responsible, but all of a sudden they forget that they have something in their calendar or that they were going to do, an action step to move towards something, or what they just flake out. They flake out maybe on a coaching session. And then the procrastinator can kind of go under that umbrella too. They're also normally pretty responsible, but when it's this thing, for me, it's like making videos. I just go into this fear place. I can be on Zoom all day long teaching, but making a marketing video, I'll procrastinate all day long, even though I'm so good at getting with everything else, getting all my stuff done. Yeah. So the flake, the confused one, the procrastinator, all related, but again, great protection mechanisms from actually being with the fear itself.
So good. Oh, yeah. And it's so easy to just slip into that. I mean, even when you're aware of them, even when you're super conscious. And I think that's what's so powerful about having a coach, being in a container, right? Is it's that reminder when you forget and you get sucked into it, and so to be able to know this as a coach and support your clients with this is so huge.
It's really so huge. If not, we're not actually able to help our clients reach their goals, because it's such a big part of human nature. It will come up, and there's a lot out there. I call it hell yeah coaching. You're procrastinating, just get off your ass and do it, right? Or just stop being a victim and just get it done. And of course there are moments for pep talks, but that kind of coaching in general actually creates shame. It ends up bypassing the deeper pieces of the resistance and the fear that will come. And even if for the moment it gets a client to do something, in the long run, it will cause big halts in the progress forward. We really, as practitioners, need to know how to hold that space for clients when the resistance comes up, to lovingly create awareness around what's going on for them. And most of the time, we also need some somatic techniques to be able to go deeper to work with it, because these are deeply embedded survival strategies that aren't just cognitive based, but it's like it's rooted in nervous system survival strategies. So having those deeper techniques makes so much of a big difference.
Yeah, so good. Now you shared a story with me before about being brave in circle. And I'd love for you to share this, because so many of the women who are listening are in circle, and we create a brave space at Sistership Circle where we're really trying to show up in our courage. So I think this could be a really great story for everyone.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're asking. I think it will be really helpful and poignant. So a number of years ago, I was leading an in-person retreat. It was a facilitator training. All of these women had come in from all over the world to learn how to lead groups and facilitate. And one of the evenings of the training, it was around the time of Halloween, Samhain, and I led them through this incredible ancestor ritual, this ceremony to connect with the ancestors. And we called in the ancestors, and it was just a gorgeous, beautiful evening. It was a late night. It was like the third night of retreat. And by the time we got to the end of the ceremony, we were all like elated and excited, but also I was feeling pretty tired. And we closed the ceremony, and then everybody went to their rooms. I went to my room. We were going to meet again the next morning. And as I was laying in bed that night, I had a feeling that something was wrong. I was like, something is off, and I don't know what it is. And I realized laying in bed that I had called in the ancestors in ceremony, but at the end of the night, I had forgotten to release the ancestors. And I was like, oh gosh, that wasn't maybe such a good thing. And also I'm teaching them how to like open and close, and I forgot that piece. But okay, it's fine. And so I got to the retreat the next morning, and we started off with a check-in in the morning. We were all sitting in circle, and each woman had an opportunity to just share what was moving through them, what was resonating. And as woman by woman shared, one was like, I had a terrible night. I felt like my grandmother Betty was in the room with me. Yeah. And the next woman was like, I saw like these weird lights in the room, and I just felt like I couldn't sleep. And with each share, I was going, oh my God, I know exactly why this has happened. It's because I didn't release the ancestors. And I had choice there. I could have abused my power and, gotten to the last woman, abused my power, and been like, oh, that's just so normal and it's okay, and moved on. But I knew that it was a moment for being brave. I knew it was a moment for being in my leadership in full integrity, and also to model for the women in the room. And after everybody shared, I took a deep breath, And I said, I want you all to know why this happened. And with a little bit shaking in my voice, and also because this was a training, and I was supposed to model this for them, I explained to them that I hadn't released the ancestors. And we went and we released them, and I apologized, and, I said some more words about that. Tanya, women in the circle were weeping as I was sharing this, and they shared they were weeping not because I made a mistake, but because for some of them it was the first time ever that a person with authority, a parent, a teacher, a leader, said, I made a mistake, I am sorry, and this is how we're going to get through this together. It was such a healing moment for so many of the women in the room and for that circle as a whole. And it was so scary for me to do, but it was so important.
Yeah. I think you're really touching on one of the most important pieces of leadership and feminine leadership, and this new model of leadership where we let go of the mask, we let go of the pretense, we don't pretend to always have it together, because in reality we're still humans and we're going to make mistakes, and that is really modeling what it looks like to be a leader. I love it. I love that you are sharing this, and that piece around it being so well received, and how this is so uncommon, because we are taught to don't get messy, don't reveal your vulnerability as a leader, because that's not what we're supposed to do. As an expert, as an authority, you need to cover your ass versus, hey, I'm human, here's my mess. And now we get to actually learn from that mess, and we get to turn it into the message, because that's really, truly how they're going to learn. Is, I think we learn the facilitation skills by seeing how not to do it, right?
Yes, 100%. And also, it's this piece about normalizing imperfection.
Yes.
That I think is this world, this patriarchal culture needs more of, because humans are messy and humans are imperfect. And all of this, like in our industry and the whole world of like leaders just trying to keep up this perfect veneer, it does damage in many ways. But one of the ways it does damage is people that watch that go into shame because they think that that's what they're supposed to aspire to, some perfect image of leadership or being a coach or being a facilitator or whatever it is. And it's so damaging. Not only that, it erodes trust too. So it's so important to normalize. We need to do this with our kids also. For those of us that have kids, like, I'm normalizing and revealing my imperfection and telling my kids I made mistakes as much as I can, because I want them to evolve into human, people, adults that can be regulated inside of their nervous systems and confident in themselves with the fact that they are imperfect.
Yeah. And I'd like to point out too, if you had tried to cover that up, energetically, the women still would have felt something off. And that's the piece around eroding the trust, because when there's something off or we have a withhold, everyone can still feel it. So now there would be this unsettled piece, and like the integrity of the container is out because you weren't actually being authentic and trying to cover up the mistake and pretend like it didn't happen. Or however, you know, that's the piece of where why this is so important and why it erodes trust when we try to cover things up and sidestep over our mistakes or our mess and pretend like it's not there.
Completely. We could say whatever words we want, but energy doesn't lie. And the energy of the breach is going to be there. Yeah. And it erodes the trust. It erodes the container.
Yeah, we might as well clean it up. And it's a brave act. It's not easy. You were shaking. It took so much courage for you to speak that. Right? Yeah. Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about integrity, and especially, you know, in the industry of that's happening. What are some of the other things that are eroding the integrity that we can, or that you teach to reestablish that?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I mean, there's so many pieces. And, you know, in addition to like the ones that we've already touched on, I'll go back for a moment to this shame piece. It's so big, and practitioners who are so well-meaning but haven't done the work can inadvertently shame their clients, and they do a lot. It's because when we as practitioners go into fear that we're not doing a good enough job, that our client is maybe upset with us, that they're feeling unsatisfied, when we go into fear that maybe the client can't do it, we can end up inadvertently saying things to shame the client. Like, oh, you could have done better. Or, oh, you don't need to feel that way, right? That's a big one. Like, oh, you don't need to feel that way. You don't need to be scared about that. So it's this like this bypassing and shaming that is, number one, like you were asking, like not in integrity. But the other piece about it is it's counter to co-creating transformation. Because when we bypass fears, when we inadvertently shame for emotions or for resistance or for feeling anyway, it halts the transformation process. Fear and resistance are actually part of the transformation process, but when you add the layer of shame onto that, that's what halts it. So that's one big piece. You know, another one that I'll share that's a real biggie is, and we have to, all of us have to be really watched for this, is the little ways that we limit our clients' agency. So I'll tell a personal story about this because it's really poignant. I was once a participant at an event a couple of years ago. This actually has to do with agency and shaming. It's a really good story. It highlights all of it. I was once a participant at an event a couple of years ago. Someone on my team had invited me. I wasn't sure, but I went. And I really wanted a breakthrough at this event. And at a certain point, the leader was talking about time and creating and manifesting more time. And I specifically wanted a breakthrough around time because at that point, and this is an ongoing thing for me, like just feeling like, oh my gosh, I need more time. And so I wasn't finding the breakthrough through the curriculum, and it was time, people were asking questions. I went to the microphone and I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. And I stood up and I said to this guy, and he's like one of the like big gurus in the coaching industry. And I said, I really would like to have more time for my business, but I've got a 7-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I feel like, parenting is such a big commitment for me that I just can't, I haven't figured out how to devote more time to my business. And he looked straight at me and he said, you know what your problem is? Your problem is that you don't like your work enough. So when you decide to like your work more, come back and we'll talk about how you can create more time for yourself. And everyone in the room clapped at his brilliance, and I had this breakthrough. And of course I hadn't. And I was thinking, what is this? Like, I'm feeling shame now that all these people in the room think I'm not committed enough to my work, when the reality is I have 2 young children and parenting is my top priority. I'm not going to eat into that time for my business. So there were 2 things going on there. There was the shame piece because he didn't know what to do with me. He wasn't honoring where I was at, like I was saying before. And then the other mistake that this guy made that has to do with integrity and has to do with transformation is that he tried to consult me. He gave me his consulting advice versus holding the space for me to ask a breakthrough or clarifying question that would allow me to have my power and my agency and find some answers for myself. And anyway, long story to say, a lot of times it's out of integrity to consult or to give our opinion. As practitioners, we actually need to ask more questions and consult less.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm like, does he have kids? And that's part of it, right? It's like when we don't perhaps have a point of reference where we can have empathy and compassion, those clarifying questions can help us actually get into the client's world a little bit more. And then we can be of more support because we could actually see it from their perspective. Like, I don't think he had any awareness of what it's like to be a mother of children, because a lot of fathers, they're not actually responsible for the kids, right? Like the man's world is, I go to work from 9 to 5. My wife is the one who does all the things, So yeah, that's really
there was that, and then there was also this thing. There was a power structure there, where there was a power over and a hierarchy, and always with our clients, if we have a power over structure going on, it's going to be out of integrity and it's going to stop the flow of transformation. We want to always be creating a power with structure and a partnership. Like, so much of his, what your problem is, came from that power over paradigm.
Yeah. Versus the new model of co-creation, that we're in this together and I'm holding your hand and we're looking at this, we're side by side, like looking at this together. And that is it. It's the co-creation. Beautiful. Yeah. So is there anything, we're coming close to wrapping up, but is there anything that you really want to talk about that we haven't touched on yet that you feel like is really important to this conversation?
I don't think so. I feel like we've looked at so many different things. The only thing I want to underscore, and I underscore this in all of my trainings, is that your techniques, whatever your transformational techniques are, whether it's to work with fear or work with resistance or help people vision or work with beliefs or work with shadow, like all the things that I teach in my training, whatever your techniques are, they're only as good as the practitioner's level of energetics. They're only as good as, for us as practitioners, our ability to come into our client containers as regulated as we can be, having worked through our own fears, having worked through our own shadows, through our own resistances. And no myth of perfection here. Like, I continue for the rest of my life, I'll be continuing to work on my stuff. It's not about being perfect, but the techniques will never get off the ground unless we bring the energy of respect, mutual respect of ourselves and our clients, mutual love of ourselves and our clients, mutual compassion and honoring, and knowing that no matter what our clients serve up, no matter what the resistance is, no matter what the fear, no matter what the difficulty or the block, that they're whole and complete, we're whole and complete, nothing has gone wrong here. It's about leaning in and meeting the moment and then walking the path together. Like, that is, if I can just like underscore anything, it's our energetics that we bring. That's brave.
Yes.
That's brave.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so you have a free gift that's in our show notes. You want to share a little bit about it for our listeners?
Yeah, it's a PDF on how to help your clients and yourself work through procrastination and self-sabotage. And we look at more in depth in all the different resistance archetypes and some next steps on how to work with all of them.
Brilliant. I love it. So head on over to the show notes, and that's at sistershipcircle.com/EP46. EP46. And you can grab that PDF. And then you can also find Joanna's information there for more amazing things in her world, and to go and discover and play with Joanna. Thank you so much for being here with me today. This was such a deep and profound conversation. I'm so grateful. And we'll catch you later, everyone, in the next Brave Woman podcast.
Up next, ready for a change from the typical New Year's resolutions? Here's a ritual you want to do in the next week before completing the year to set yourself up powerfully for a massive upgrade and up-level in the year to come. You just listened to this show. I'd love for you to leave the Brave Woman podcast an honest review. Reviews help podcasts like this one grow, making it more possible for me to devote my time, energy, and money to its production. If you take a screenshot of your review and email it to support@sistershipcircle.com, we'll send you one of our archetype activations as a thank you gift. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it.